afternoon, Ms. McNulty.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Good.
Will you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Officer Jerry McNulty.
And what do you do for a living?
I am an investigative officer for the Lone Star Police Department.
And what kind of training do you have?
I've been trained I've gone through the police academy, been trained on investigative techniques, safety techniques, collecting evidence, all the information you need to be a police officer on the street, basically.
And what are some of the things that you do as a police officer? You put that training in use?
Yes, we a lot of times respond to calls, have to keep the safety of our citizens, collect evidence, and investigate crime scenes.
And when you respond to incidents, what type of things do you do?
We preserve and secure the scenes, preserve any evidence that there may be, interview witnesses potentially that have seen any crimes.
I'd like to turn your attention to October 2nd, 2014. Were you working that day?
I was.
And what were you doing?
Well, I was driving around in my vehicle when I noticed an incident occurring in front of the 7-Eleven, and that caught my attention, so I decided to pull in to observe what was going on.
And where was this located?
Right in front of the 7-Eleven at 2271 North Frontage Road.
And what city is that in?
Lone Star?
What county is that in?
Lone Star County?
All right. And so you said you noticed an incident. What time did this happen?
I believe it was about 2 o'clock.
And did you do anything to document what you saw?
Yes, I pulled in and I began securing the scene, making sure everybody was safe, and once I determined what was going on, I later interviewed witnesses and created diagrams of the crime scene.
And would you recognize that diagram if I were to show it to you today?
And yes, I would.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 2. Permission to approach the witness. Ms. McNulty, do you recognize what I just handed you?
Yes, this is the diagram I created of the crime scene.
And is it in the same or substantially the same condition as when you prepared it?
Yes, it is.
And does it fairly and accurately depict the scene as you saw it?
Yes, I did take some specific measurements of different things.
Objection, Your
however-
Honor. I ask that before she publishes this to the jury, they properly enter it.
Without showing the exhibit to the jury or relying on it for your answers, will that exhibit aid in your testimony about what you saw?
Yes, it will.
Your Honor, I'd like to offer Exhibit 2 into evidence this time.
Any objection?
Without objection.
All right, submitted without objection. Exhibit 2.
Now, you said you were driving on the North Frontage Road. Where is that on the map? Oh, yeah, show it to the jury.
North Frontage Road goes along the bottom here.
And you said it was eastbound? Which way is that?
Yes, north is, I drew the map north facing north, so eastbound would be this way, west, south.
And what did you see from the road?
From the road, I saw two vehicles actually right here, and all the doors were open and the headlights were turned on, so it was difficult to see exactly what was going on, but as I approached, there were multiple individuals in front actually wrestling with one another.
And what else did you see?
Well, I decided to pull in, and when I saw the two individuals that were wrestling, I noticed that the one had severe trauma to his head and was bleeding profusely down his face.
And did you see any vehicles on the map?
Yes.
In the parking lot?
There's a red truck right here and an Audi station wagon right here, blocking the entrance of the actual 7-Eleven.
And was anyone in either the Audi or the red truck?
No, there was no individuals in the car.
And did you identify who the Audi belonged to?
The Audi belonged to Mr. Mitchell, I believe.
Okay. And based on your investigation, was anyone else around the area that night?
The other individual that was involved in the fight was Mr. James.
Now, I'd like to turn your attention now to, you said that multiple people were in an argument in the parking lot.
Yes.
After after seeing the argument, what did you do?
I separated the two from fighting, and I took the one that had the head injury and was bleeding, and I sent him over to sit on the curb in front of the first bank while I got everybody else collected and called an ambulance to come pick him up for his injuries.
And who had the head injury?
That was Mr. James.
Okay, and what condition was Mr. James in?
He didn't look good. He had a severe laceration to his forehead that was bleeding. He also had, his eye was starting to, the eye socket was starting to turn purple and closing. And he seemed a little disoriented at the time, so that's why I immediately called for additional responding officers and an ambulance to come pick him up.
And the Audi that you mentioned was in the parking lot. Where was the Audi at the end of your investigation?
So when I arrived, the Audi was parked right here, blocking the entrance to get into the 7-Eleven. However, sometime during the course of my investigation, the Audi went from being parked here to being parked in the very first parking spot in front of Bull Crabs.
And how many officers were on the scene helping you that day?
I don't remember exactly how many, but there were several of us there.
All right, and did you figure out what Mr. James' injuries came from?
As I was approaching the two individuals fighting, I did notice on the ground there was a mag light, and I picked that up. Several witnesses I learned from told me that there was a fight and that the injuries were caused from Mr. Bitchell hitting Mr. James with that mag light that I had collected.
And would you recognize the mag light if I showed it to you then?
Yes, I would.
Approaching defense with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 1. Commissioner approaching, Mr. Ryan.
Sir.
Ms. McNulty, do you recognize what I just handed you?
Yes, this is the mag light that I collected from the scene.
And is it in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered it?
It is.
Your Honor, this time the state offers Exhibit 1 in the evidence.
Any objection?
I would object to relevance. There has been no foundation to link this flashlight to the alleged events, and therefore it would be irrelevant at this time.
Your Honor, the officer just testified that through the course of her investigation, she became aware that the victim, Mr. James, was hit in the head with this mag light. I think it's very relevant.
Okay.
I don't believe that there's been any foundation laid that the victim actually was hit in the head with a mag light, so at this time, I don't believe it's relevant.
Well, she said witnesses on the scene told her the injuries came from the light. Now, might be a little bit of a hearsay problem there, but there was no objection.
Yes,
I'm gonna overrule the objection about it. Admitted. Exhibit, 2. No, exhibit.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's pre-marked as Exhibit 1.
Exhibit 1.
Yes, sir.
All right, admitted.
All right. Ms. McNulty, did you take any statement from anyone at the scene?
I talked to many individuals that were there that day, but subsequent to the actual time of the crime, I went back to complete the drawing of my map and talked to a witness who had been there on that night and got her accounts of what had happened.
And did you talk to William James during the course?
I did talk to William James after he had been admitted to the hospital and had x-rays done, patched up, and all of that. He had come back into a better conscious state.
And what again was the physical appearance of Mr. James?
Jackson, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Well, you talking about after the hospital
After
visit
the
now?
hospital.
All right, we're talking about different times, so with that understanding, I'll overrule the objection.
Mr. James had received several stitches because of his lacerations to his head. Specifically, he had 21 external stitches and numerous internal stitches to close 3 different wounds that were found on his head.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation as to the internal stitches. This witness would have no way of knowing whether or not he had internal stitches.
What about that?
We'll move on from that, Your Honor.
Move to strike, Your Honor.
All right, I'll grant the motion to strike about internal stitches, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, remember, jury, I'm gonna ask you to disregard the testimony you just heard about internal stitches.
Ms. McNulty, were you able to note the appearance of Pete Mitchell?
Yes, based off my visual observations, I also took digital photos of the injuries that he had.
Of Mr. James?
Yes,
Would you recognize the photos that you took of Mr. James?
yes, I would.
I'm showing opposing counsel what's been pre-marked as Exhibit 11A. Permission to approach. Ms. McNulty, do you recognize what I just handed you?
Yes, these are the photos I took of Mr. James.
And are they in the same or substantially the same condition as when you took them?
They are.
And do they fairly and accurately depict the injuries you saw?
Yes, they do.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to offer Exhibit 11A as evidence.
No objection, Your
All
Honor.
right, without objection. State's Exhibit what?
11A, Your Honor.
11A.
And using this photo, will you please explain to the jury the injuries that you see there?
Absolutely. In this first photo, you can tell that the eye of Mr. James was severely swollen and starting to turn purplish and was completely shut. It was later determined that he had actually fractured his eye
Objection, Your Honor.
socket.
Hearsay that it was later determined that he actually fractured those.
How about that? What's your response?
Your Honor, I don't think that's a statement. And since it's not a statement, it's not going to intrude.
She said it was later determined that it was a fracture involved.
Yes, Your Honor. So it's either speculation from that statement or it was derived from hearsay.
Sustained.
Move to strike, Your Honor.
All right, granted. Now, the jury disregard the last statement about a fracture.
And that's fine for now, Ms. McNulty. Did you have an opportunity to witness the physical appearance of Pete Mitchell?
Yes, I talked to Pete Mitchell on October 2nd as well.
And what was the physical appearance of Pete Mitchell?
Mr. Mitchell didn't have any physical injuries. However, he was wearing a gray sweatshirt that was coated in blood, as well as having blood on his hands, and I believe even a little on his jeans and shoes.
Did you notice any injuries in Pete Mitchell when you saw him?
Not that I can recall.
And did you notice anything else about his condition?
I believe that was it, just that his clothes were coated in blood.
And do you recognize Pete Mitchell today?
I do.
Is he in the courtroom?
He just stepped out a moment ago. But he was here.
And who did you charge in this?
I arrested Mr. Mitchell on scene.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Right. Ms. Basie, you may cross-examine the witness.
Officer McNulty, when you arrived at the scene, there was a crowd of people, right?
Correct.
And there were a lot of people talking to you at once.
There were.
But you never took their official statements, did you?
Well, I didn't even know what the situation was, so I needed to just get to the heart of the situation before I could talk to anyone.
Well, you didn't take down their names, but you could talk to them later.
There was a fight going on, so I didn't think it was imperative for me to take down names before bringing up a fight.
You didn't tell them to stay so you could take their statements later.
No, I didn't think that was of importance at the time.
So you never took statements from the crowd of witnesses who saw this fight.
I did take statements from a few individuals, however, not when I initially arrived at the scene.
Now, you said on direct examination that there were several officers with you, right?
No, initially it was just myself, which made it even more difficult. Since I was alone, I had to make sure that the safety of everyone as well as preserving the scene at the same time. That's why when I figured out the magnitude of the situation, I called additional responding officers and ambulance to the scene.
So when you arrived at the scene, you were completely alone.
I was by myself.
You called for backup officers,
Yes.
but those backup officers, they never arrived, did they?
I believe they did.
Well, you noted in your statement that the ambulance that you called arrived, right?
The ambulance did arrive, and I believe the police arrived shortly after.
So you would have noted that the police arrived if you wrote that the ambulance arrived.
Potentially.
Your Honor, I
I'm approaching opposing counsel with the witness's statement and report. Approaching the witness with the same document.
All right.
Officer McNulty, this is the report that you filled out after your investigation, right? That's all 1, 2, 3, 4 pages, right? And this is a full and complete copy of the report that you gave.
Yes,
And in that report, you included everything that was important to this case, right?
I did.
And in that report, you included the fact that you called backup officers.
Yes, I did.
In that report, you included the fact that you called an ambulance.
I did.
And so you explained that the ambulance showed up,
I did.
but nowhere in that entire report did you say a single backup officer ever arrived, did you?
I don't think I report that. It's not typical of us police officers to put additional testimony in our reports of other police officers' reports on the scene as well. The ambulance is a different entity, so we have to document what they did on the scene, but the other officers would add anything to the reports as they saw necessary on the scene.
So just to clarify, you thought it was important enough to document that you needed to call backup officers, but it wasn't important enough to document that the officers arrived.
No, because they would create their own reports at that point.
Permission to approach and retrieve. Now, when you arrived at the scene, you saw 2 individuals wrestling, right?
Yes,
You saw separated Mr. James and Pete Mitchell, right?
yes,
You saw that Mr. James had injuries to his head,
correct.
but you never asked Pete Mitchell if he had a single injury, did you?
Did not ask him, but from looking at him, he didn't have any injuries, and I did ask him about where the blood had come from, and he didn't state that it had come anywhere from his personal body that he would have injuries that was causing this blood to come out.
But you never asked him about a single injury, did you?
No, I didn't observe any injuries, and I asked about the blood, and he didn't say that it was coming anywhere from his body.
And you never asked him if he was physically okay.
I did not ask him that exact question, no.
He was pretty compliant with you while you were at the scene, right?
Mr. Mitchell was compliant.
He didn't run away when you arrived.
No, but, no, he didn't.
And you didn't have to place him in handcuffs, did you?
No, I did not.
You didn't put him in your squad car.
Well, I did eventually, once I arrested him and found out he was the one who started the fight.
But he stayed on the scene voluntarily the entire time that you were taking care of Mr. James.
I quickly took care of Mr. James and called an ambulance for him, and then took care of the rest of my investigation. So it wasn't too long of a duration that he had to hang around for, and during that time, he was in my direct line of sight and under my questioning, so
But he stayed voluntarily, right?
sure, I guess he could have left if he wanted to.
And then when you came up and spoke with him, he spoke to you voluntarily, right?
He did speak to me.
And so you would say that he was compliant throughout your investigation.
He was compliant.
Now, an important part of being a police officer is securing the scene, right?
That is part of our process.
Because you want to make sure that none of this evidence is tampered with, right?
Absolutely.
And you want to preserve the condition of everything that's on that scene.
As long as we can ensure the safety of everyone there, then yes, we want to preserve everything.
But you actually didn't secure this scene, did you?
Like I said, when I initially arrived, I was by myself, and there was a huge crowd, as you've stated. My first job is to make sure that everyone is safe that's involved, and with a fight breaking out, and there's lots of alcohol involved, my first job was the safety of everyone.
So the entire time you were there, this scene was never secured, right?
No, later on, once we were able to control the scene, we definitely did try to preserve as much evidence as possible and collect as much evidence. But initially, by myself with a crowd of intoxicated individuals, safety was the priority.
Well, this fight occurred right outside of an Audi that was on the scene, right?
Yes,
And during your investigation, this Audi was moved 70 feet, right?
yes, it was.
And you didn't even see it when it was moved.
I did not see it get moved at the time, but I understood it was blocking the intersection, so it definitely was a safety hazard to have it blocking the intersection.
But you didn't order anyone to move that vehicle.
I did not specifically.
You didn't move it yourself.
No, I did not.
So while you're at this scene, you allowed a piece of evidence to be moved without your knowledge.
The car was blocking the entrance of the 7-Eleven and was a safety hazard, so it was best that it did get moved into a parking spot where it could be secured and then later checked for any evidence.
But you allowed a piece
against your orders, to be moved without
Objection,
your...
Your Honor, ask the answer.
Your Honor, the witness has not
No,
said yes
I'm
or no.
not sure she got an answer yet, overruled.
You allowed a piece of evidence, this vehicle, to be moved without your knowledge,
I wouldn't say I allowed it, but yes, it did get moved.
and you couldn't see this happening.
I did not see this happening in the crowd of people.
Now, another thing that you're trained on is evidence collection, right?
Yes, it is.
To avoid any contamination of evidence, right?
Absolutely.
But you didn't follow that evidence collection protocol, did you?
I would disagree with you.
Well, you were grabbing evidence with your bare hands, right?
At the time, we were unsure that it was evidence, and when I saw it, it was in the middle of the street, so I picked it up and put it in my pocket for later, investigation.
So when you were investigating this piece of evidence, this flashlight, you picked it up with your bare hands.
Once again, I didn't know it was evidence at the time. It was a flashlight in the middle of the street. So as I was walking to make sure nobody ran over it, stepped on it, tripped on it, I grabbed it and put it in my pocket as I was initially approaching the fight that was occurring.
And then you didn't place it into an evidence bag at any point.
Later on, back at the station, of course we did.
But while you were at the scene, you didn't place it in an evidence bag.
Not at the scene as I was approaching the fight.
You put it directly in your pocket.
Yes,
And you also mentioned the blood that was on Pete Mitchell at the scene,
yes.
and his sweatshirt was actually removed while he was there.
He removed his sweatshirt and I took it from him.
And when you took it from him, you moved that blood-covered sweatshirt with your bare hands.
I placed it on the vehicle, on my squad car, actually.
With your bare hands.
Yes.
You didn't wear gloves.
No, I did not have gloves on it.
You didn't place that sweatshirt into an evidence bag.
No, it didn't. It was soaked in the blood, so we were allowing it some time to dry. The most evidence that we were gonna get on of it was the blood stains. My handprints or fingerprints wouldn't have been any substance to the sweatshirt itself.
But actually, you never placed this in evidence at all, did you?
No, I don't think we did.
And you saw this blood on the scene, and you didn't collect a single drop of blood to put into evidence, did you?
No, we did not.
You didn't order a single test on this blood.
Well, we didn't collect any, so there's no test to be ordered.
So you don't have any test that can determine whose blood that actually was.
Again, we didn't collect any blood, so we couldn't run any tests.
And then you went back to go look at the scene 4 hours later, right?
It took about 4 hours to get Mr. Mitchell down to the station and get him checked in at the station, and then I went immediately back to the scene to take official measurements so I could create an accurate diagram.
And when you went back to the scene, you saw this Audi with a blood smear on it, right?
Yes,
But
the
you-
vehicle had some blood on it.
But you didn't collect that blood.
No,
You didn't take a picture of that vehicle.
no, I did not.
In fact, the only thing you took a picture of the entire time were Mr. James's injuries, right?
I took a photo of Mr. James's injuries, and yes, we did have the flashlight in, we didn't need a picture of it because we had the actual flashlight, so that was another piece of evidence.
Well, actually, when you collected that piece of evidence, you didn't take a picture of where the flashlight originally was, did you?
No, but I did mark it on the diagram where I collected it.
And you didn't take a picture of Pete Mitchell.
No, Pete Mitchell didn't have any observable wounds that we needed a picture. He did get his picture taken at intake at the station. His mugshot was on file immediately after that, and it didn't show any wounds.
But you didn't ask him if there were any wounds that you need to take a picture of.
He said, when I asked where the blood was coming from, he didn't say that it was coming anywhere from his body, and during check-in, no wounds were found on him.
Now, you issued a citation against Pete Mitchell for disorderly conduct, right?
Correct.
But you also issued a citation against William James for disorderly conduct, right?
Yes, I understand that a fight takes two people, and Mr. James was just as much involved as Mr. Mitchell was.
But there were actually more than 2 people involved in this fight, weren't there?
I'm not sure where you're going.
Well, you issued a citation against J.T. Sanborn, right? Would you recognize a copy of the citation you issued against J.T. Sanborn?
Yes, I do remember issuing one against him.
And that's because there were 3 people involved in this fight.
Yes, Mr. J.T. Sanborn was also present at the fight.
And J.T. Sanborn, that was Willie James's friend, right? you had enough evidence to cite J.T. Sanborn for disorderly conduct, you never even took his statement, did you?
I did not take his statement.
And you didn't speak with him while he was at the scene.
I did not speak with him at the scene, however, we did talk to him down at the station.
Now, you have a dash cam on your car, right?
No, I don't believe I do.
So as an officer that responds to scenes, they don't even give you a dash cam?
I know, it's crazy.
And so you wouldn't have any video footage from...
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Well, you made your point, now let's move on, I'll sustain the objection.
And this incident happened outside of 3 commercial businesses, right?
Yes, the 7-Eleven, the bank, and Bullcrafts.
And you actually learned that the incident started in the 7-Eleven, right?
That's what I learned from the witness interviews that I collected, that iced tea bottle had gotten knocked over, and that's what caused this.
But you didn't go into the 7-Eleven and speak with any of the employees, did you?
No, because the fight didn't actually occur inside the 7-Eleven, it took place outside of it.
But you didn't speak with any employees to determine if the fight occurred inside the 7-Eleven?
No, I didn't.
And you didn't ask for any video footage from inside the 7-Eleven?
I don't believe there were any videos present in the 7-Eleven.
But you never asked, did you?
Well, when I went back to do my diagram, I didn't note any actual video cameras on the building, so I was able to visually see that there was no video footage that we could recover to help us.
But the simple answer is you didn't go inside that store and ask anyone if there was video footage.
I didn't ask, but I didn't need to.
And you didn't ask anyone from any of these businesses if there was video footage.
I didn't ask because I could solve the answer myself.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
And you redirect.
Yes, Your Honor, just really quick. Ms. McNulty, did Mr. Mitchell ever tell you that he was injured?
No, he did not.
And in your experience, could Mr. James's injuries be caused by a fist?
No.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
What about that?
Your Honor, it's, the answer is rationally based on the witness's perception.
I think so, I'll allow it, overrule.
So to ask that one more time, in your experience, could Mr. James's injuries be caused by a fist?
Absolutely not. As you can see on the injuries, they're much more severe than what a fist could offer. Also, they were in various parts on the top of his head, the lacerations, which would be very difficult to achieve with an actual fist. It looked like it was more long, round cylinder stick.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation that it was a long, round cylinder stick.
I think that's going across the line, I'll sustain the objection.
Move to strike, Your Honor.
All right, granted.
Ms. McNulty, who did you see bleeding at the scene?
Mr. James was bleeding.
And did you witness the defendant bleed?
No, but I did witness the defendant having blood all over his sweatshirt, and he was completely unaware that it was even there.
Thank you very much. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, you may step down. Please call your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time the state calls Mr. William James.